Ewan.
Hey, Joe.
I know there's a lot of sides to this argument. Should physical media die?
Of course not, you wee scally. Physical media is great, and I was really excited when this question came up this morning, Joseph, because I am a big physical media guy. I think there was a period of time over the last 6-7-ish years where I kind of was like embracing the convenience of streaming, but then something kind of just went in my brain. I was like, I miss having things that are tangible and that I can hold on to and that I can grasp with my own two hands. And streaming, you don't actually own anything, and I've basically been on a massive physical media kick for the past few years now. I've like amassed like a huge collection of Blu-rays, and it's weird though because I'm talking about film there, but for games specifically, I've never really fully committed to digital-only stuff. It just doesn't sit right with me. I like the idea of being able to trade something in if I get bored with it, which will then lead me to regret that decision 20 years from now when it somehow is slabbed on a board in CEX and it's going for like 300 quid because dumb. But main thing is, I just don't think that gaming wins. I don't think gaming wins if we move into an only digital space. I think it limits our options. I think, again, you lose that aspect of reselling stuff as well, but it's nice to own things. And I think the frustrating thing here is when people talk about convenience of like, oh, I can just download something from the PlayStation Store and it's pre-downloaded at midnight, it's good to go, whatever. You obviously have an update to go on top of that, and it's never really the case of it. It's always good to go at midnight. And like your stuff with like the Series S and obviously, you know, the digital-only PS5, it's a case of you being locked into the terms being set by the console manufacturers in their own stores. So it gives you less choice there. But I always do see people kind of moving towards that kind of Game Pass space. Game Pass is praised as this great service. I'm sure it's a great value for money. I don't know because I don't own an Xbox. But even if I did, I still kind of find the idea of like paying for a subscription service to play games, I still find that quite weird. I would just rather own the thing and have it. And it really does frustrate me that Alan Wake 2, one of the biggest games of the year, a game I've been waiting years for, is going to be digital only. And the kind of the arguments being made here is that, well, we can release it and it will be less buggy because we don't have to like put a version of the game on a disc and you have to download an update or whatever. But that's still kind of really lame for me. It's like you're gonna have that game, and we all know how crap video game preservation is at this point in time. We don't know how the games that are coming out on this generation of consoles, how they're going to be preserved years from now. Hopefully way better than, you know, the past few generations. But it's still a case of like, well, you don't own that and it'll be locked onto your account or system or whatever. And yeah, I just think if physical games went away, you're just limiting choice. And it kind of does concern me that people are still embracing the idea of like a digital-only future for media in general, because, you know, these companies haven't really shown that they care about preservation or, you know, your own choice. So yeah, go treat yourself to a physical game if you haven't in a while, because it's nice. Just remember the joy of holding on to a thing and opening it and then smelling that delicious instruction booklet and opening, you know, nothing beats new game smell. There's an entire generation of people right now growing up that don't know what new game smell smells like. And that is shocking.
There's an entire generation of people growing up that don't know what a manual is.
Yeah.
Remember the manuals?
Yeah, manuals, instruction booklets. Kids these days.
Stevie.
Hiya.
Should physical games die?
I think that's classist.
But
seriously, isn't that like, I think that's like a question that someone who's got $70 to spend every month on a subscription service would say. But the reality is most people across the world don't do that or can't do that and are buying stuff and saving up for stuff, especially at Christmas, for their 150 quid physical game that they get once a year, or like their family have pitched in to get it. So I think us as gamers, we tend to not think about the fact that we are just in the top little percentage of consumers when it comes to like the market of people that are playing, for example, waiting for the Call of Duty to come out, or waiting for the one thing they always play, like FIFA is an amazing example of this, where people only play FIFA and that's what they wait for, and they wait for the new one and then they go and buy it at a store. As far as instruction booklets go and the great decline of the instruction booklet, I mean, I remember Where in the World is Carmen San Diego, and it came with a booklet where you could go through and see all of the bad guys that you were trying to catch and go through it, and what that was like to have that physical media. And again, people can't afford to spend $70 on a collector's edition box with a massive stone figurine in it. So we're losing the opportunity to have these just little things that you'd get alongside something that actually meant loads to you and made the game come to life if you had a map of something in front of you, or if you had even just a couple of little cheat codes or things you couldn't get from just playing it, and you could pass that down to the next generation. I think that's important. But yeah, I think it's a classist argument.
Joe!
Yes.
Do physical games die?
Well, absolutely not. I don't have too much more to add, on top of what everyone else is saying, because everyone has already kind of made those points, and they're all very, very good points. In that, preservation of video games is absolutely terrible at the moment, and seems possibly worse than ever.
Yes.
And that yes, there's a classist element to digital-only media, not only in terms of having to save up all that money for the one game a year, but like sometimes, people, I live pretty comfortably, and I don't feel like I could spend 70 quid on every game, Like, I have to wait till things are cheaper, generally in somewhere like CEX. And speaking of preservation, there are so many things that you just can't play anymore. And one example that came up the other day is I booted up my PS3, and there was Tokyo Jungle. I was like, oh, Tokyo Jungle, they took that off the storefront. I was like, but I've still got it on this. But then I went on it, and it was like, because this game has been taken off the storefront, you still can't play it.
What?
I was like, you fuckers. Like, and that's just one example of a game that I guess is just lost now. Like, it must exist somewhere, but we're moving into that realm of like 1910s and 1920s films that are just like, they just don't exist anymore.
And there's not even a big fire to blame it
Yeah,
on.
yeah. It's not like all the film reels burned up. It's just that the publisher went, who cares? And I think that's terrible, And there's something to, yeah, I want to be able to go and get a box with the game in it. I want to own it. As you said, you get to own a game, generally, if it's on disc. And I just, I like glancing at my collection of PS2 games when I'm, like, sitting in my office. It's like, it's a gigantic collection of them. And it's nice to see all those and go, oh, I remember going into the shop and buying that one. I remember buying that one. I remember getting that one. I remember the feeling of each one and how special it was. And you don't really get that when you just sort of scrolling through a library on your PS4 or your PS5, do you?
It's not an event anymore.
No, it's not an event, and I mean the manuals speak. You were talking about Where in the World's Carmen Sandiego, having all the profiles of the different villains you had to catch, but there were all kinds of other games. Rockstar were especially good at it, having their manuals look like travel guides for their respective cities. That had the maps as well. Skyrim had a kind of fabric map of some kind, which is amazing. Like Jack and Daxter had a great map with it. The Warriors was one of my favourites because it had all this really, really lovely, like, hand-drawn art of all the characters and things. And that's going. I mean, even physical media now. Games don't have manuals anymore. They have like one little slip of paper in that say here's your code to like pay extra for an intact edition of this game. Before we like chop bits of it out to sell on as DLC. But digital only is just it's not a good format. Preservation is bad. It drives prices up constantly, and you can never, you're going to really struggle to get anything for a reasonable price if you can't afford to get every game new, which is very, very bad. I like Xbox Game Pass. It's been quite useful for me. It means I've got to like play games I probably wouldn't have bought otherwise, but it shouldn't be a replacement. That needs to be an alternative and absolutely not a replacement.
So should physical games die?
I think at this point we're all in agreement that absolutely not. Like, I like doing these here with everyone. Obviously, it's really nice. But if I was doing this at home, if you're a regular watcher of this, usually I have a stack of games behind me.
Yes.
People often point out, like, oh, what's all these interesting games from various different eras that you've got sitting on display? And yeah, I like having that. And I'm not going to reiterate too many of the points that have already been made. Obviously, like, I'm in big time agreement. I'm sitting there nodding away about it being an event, even just like waiting, you don't have to go to the store, just waiting for it to come through your mailbox and being like, the game. And I was just saying, I'm sure I read online that there's a made up word for the feeling of satisfaction that you get, the looping that little bit of plastic off, especially on a Nintendo game. They have the bit in the middle and then you slide the two bits out. Somebody made up a word for how good that feels to do. They're absolutely right. And when it comes to preservation, I know I've gone on this rant several times before throughout the years. Like, it's a big thing for me. It's frankly disgusting, the state of the industry that. And film has its problems as well, but you do get loads of guff in black and white movies. You get Blu-ray releases all the time. Video games, what was that statistic that came out a couple of months ago? It was like 70% of games or whatever are gone forever. It's just absurd. On top of the fact that all the industry and like the people that are in charge of it are hugely to blame for that, for making consoles that are not backwards compatible at all. And then they go, okay, you love that game? And Joe said earlier, I'm not going to come in this room and do a Red Dead remake rant. Well, I am! Pay 70 quid for the same game again, with marginally up-res textures from the last generation or something. It's like, no, just make it so I can play the thing I've already got on my shelf. Like... And that's why I have them on my shelf, and that's why I keep all my old consoles. I don't trade any consoles in. I will run them until they die, because I don't trust those games. Yeah, I don't trust those games to ever appear again. It could be something as big as Resident Evil 2, the original game, last released for the GameCube, one of the most important games of all time, and has not been ported forward since. Least of all games, using that series as an example, as I often will, like Survivor, which is definitely going to disappear forever eventually. It makes me sick.
Scott.
Hi.
Should physical games die?
This is the most loaded question intentionally because I think it sparks a whole bunch of different thoughts, and I can't deny how much I like the immediacy of preloading something and playing it at midnight. However, I also love the feeling of a nice pristine N64 cartridge and then clicking that into the N64 itself. So I don't think physical games should die, and I massively agree with anyone talking about preservation in general. I should be able to think of a random PS1 game, like Si mentioned Resident Evil 2, I'll mention Bugs and Taz Time Busters. I want to be able to go on the PlayStation Store or any particular digital storefront, which should be a giant archive of gaming history, and be able to get that. I know there obviously are realities of storing those games in theory forever, but at the same time, you would think the general attitude towards legacy archives for various consoles and brands and whatever would be available in some form. And I think that that's all I want. You want to be able to tap into those things. And it was interesting because I ended up just coughing up the cash for the Steam Deck, but I didn't get that to be a Steam machine. I got that to be an emulation machine because I wanted a legacy console that I could think of a PS1 game or a PS2 game or whatever it is and have somewhere where I can go play it again and solve that problem. I had to solve that myself, throwing £500 at the problem or whatever it was. And so that's one of those things where I just wish we had better, like I said, archives available to be able to go back to those classics. And also, it's obviously worth checking in the whole thing with digital storefronts, the pricing models, the fact that you are just stuck there paying that price if you only have a digital storefront. So I think everybody can relate to that. And it wasn't until, obviously across the 2010s when digital storefronts massively took off, that you started getting all the super deluxe editions, the £100 versions of things, £120 for stuff, because they might as well see what they can get away with and see whether you monetize that specific portion of the fandom that can afford those things. But I would never want that to be the only option. I'm all for consumer options, and obviously that ties into having a physical release at launch, which I wish Alan Wake had. But in general, I just wish the respect was there for the legacy titles and to some degree it is, but I don't want it to be the case where we are only waiting for the overpriced remake, the overpriced remaster. Always have that version available for the people who want to play it. If you think of it in regards to other mediums, you think about past books, obviously literary works, you think about movies, TV shows, whatever, they're always available. There's something there that you can get. Gaming just doesn't have that, and that sucks.